Welcome back to the Comics Aficionados right here on Thinking Critical YouTube. It looks like we're live, but we're actually not live. I'm actually on vacation. We've recorded this a few weeks ahead of time, so we're ready for this. And this is the Comics Aficionados Geek Out. We're going to talk about comic books back in the day, before the internet, before cars, before girls or any of that stuff. Back when comic books were the coolest thing in the history of the world. And I've got a great esteemed panel with me today. First up, we do have world-renowned comic book artist Eric Canete. How you doing, Eric?
I'll attest for the name part, the world-renowned. I'm gonna leave that to you. But thank you for having me, Wes. Been a while.
What are you talking about? Mark Miller's like the hottest writer in the world. He hand-selected you to be one of his artists. He doesn't pick out not great world-renowned artists.
Well, listen, I got in on the coattails of a handful of other people. It wasn't me exclusively. I got lucky.
But I think Mark Miller knew what he was doing.
You were there a little bit beforehand. Yeah, you were kind of like in that middle area.
Yeah, that's not a good thing to have on my portfolio. But thanks, you guys.
Who else we've got? We got Yule Carter, the proprietor of Fantastic Comics in Berkeley, California. How you doing, Yule?
I'm wonderful. Thanks for having me on this awesome Comics Aficionados episode. I really appreciate it.
It's going to be a lot of fun. We don't normally not talk about what's happening with the week, but I have no idea what's going to happen in 2 weeks. So we're just going to talk about comic books and how much fun they used to be. I mean, they still are, but they were always more fun back in the day.
Sure. When we were really reading it for the first time, or getting back into it, maybe when you had an open eye to it, and understood things a little bit more. You have different levels of when you were reading and what you were appreciating, and I can't wait. Yeah.
Absolutely. And finally, we do have the man so cool they call him the Breen. Eric Breen, how you doing?
Just happy to be part of this league of Erics we've got going on here.
We do have probably too many Erics here. So Breen, this is how I imagine your first comic book experience going. You're a newsie, you got the hat on, you got the suspenders, you've got your newspapers, you're saying the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, You look over and there's a Superman comic, and that was your introduction to comic books, right?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened.
That's a great setup for them.
I had just gotten my first wheel.
Shortly after the first wheel was made.
Breen's first comic book was on a stone tablet, no doubt.
Our family hadn't gotten that newfangled television yet, so all I could do was read. No, you're not that far off. It was 75.
Oh, that's pretty far off from the bombing of Pearl Harbor. But 1975, I'm only a twinkle in my daddy's eye. I don't even come into this world for 3 more years. When you're looking at the comic books, what is the thing that just like blew your mind as a little kid in 1975 that absolutely drew you into the point where you end up owning 50,000 comic books at one point?
Stupidity.
Wow.
What was it? I have an older brother, and if you get along with your older brother, or even if you don't, you kind of want to emulate him. And he had gotten into comics, so I, got curious, and I picked up a couple books at a baseball card convention of all places, and I bought a couple books here and there, like in 1970, 71, whatever. But I kind of took a liking to him, and then about 8 months later, he moved on. Apparently, I didn't. I mean, he gave me what he had, and I just built from there. And it just, I don't know how it went from wanting to be like my brother to a lifelong passion. That just kind of happens over time. When you realize,
is there one character that was just so hot at that time that once you read one of the books, you just couldn't miss it when it was new after that?
No, it's weird. When I first started, I think the first batch of new books I got was Superman in action, a Batman, a detective. So I guess I knew the DC characters more. I remember the first couple Marvels was a Fantastic Four and an Iron Man. I mean, I was reading for 3 or 4 months before I bought my first Spider-Man new. Oh, wow. There were a couple Spider-Mans that I'd picked up, late the year, or in like September of 75. But it just like once it hit me, it didn't matter. I just had to get, if it was a superhero or a horror character because I'd been into horror movies and monster magazines. I just couldn't get enough of them, and as much as my allowance would allow, and the baseball cards went by the wayside, and just comics.
But did they really go by the wayside, Breen? Because you do have a substantial baseball card collection, don't you?
I sold all those, and then when about 20 years ago, when my father passed, and we came into some money, and what they say about a fool and their money, I revisited the baseball card hobby. And that's how I built that back up, and then so
half of his house is dedicated to storing comic books, and the other half is dedicated to storing baseball cards, I believe.
That's not so bad, though. That's not so bad. Could be worse, man.
So, Breen, at that point, like comic shops, I'm sure there are comic shops, going around, but that's not really even a part of the comic book culture at that point. It's the spinner rack. It's going down to the drugstore or whatever. So what's the conversation? How does the scuttlebutt happen when you're a kid at that point? Because you're not going to the LCS kind of like we do now, or even 20 years ago. It's a completely different culture around comic books.
I'll tell you how I've been reading for a couple years. I was still in high school at this time, and my best friend lived about a block and a half over, and they were playing baseball in the street, basically use a tennis ball and, whatnot. And he hit one into a window well of one of the houses on the street. And when he was fishing it out, he saw comic books in the basement. And he knew the kid that lived there. He was kind of like the neighborhood quiet kid.
Geek.
So my friend tells me about that. And, so I see him on the bus the next day, and I go up to him, and, his name was George Peer, and I said, "Hey, Peer, I hear you collect comic books." He thought I was going to beat him up.
Well, it's because you had a pack of smokes rolled up in your white T-shirt, and your hair was slicked back,
and you're cracking your knuckles.
Switchblade comb. And he kind of goes, "Yeah," and I go, "Man, that's awesome! I do too." Blah blah. And we're friends to this day.
That's so cool.
He got into bodybuilding and stuff like that. Could squash me like a grape. Of course, we're both old as hell now, so nobody's squashing anything, but.
They just look like raisins now.
And that's I said so. There was somebody to talk comics with, and it's like I said, I've been reading comics for almost 6 years before I found my first LCS. Now there was a guy that put a shop in his basement. It was literally you get down the basement stairs, and then there's boxes everywhere, and he had a little store set up. Is really really cool as long as you didn't hit your head on the basement steps. Looking at Thor's. But that, it just, and then there were like flea markets. There'd be occasional, dealers there. But it didn't really, till the direct market came in, that gave everybody the idea to open shops and stuff. There really wasn't a whole lot of conversation to be had.
Could you draw a lot of chicks with comic books back in that time?
Well, we'll just put it like this. So the rest of my friends didn't know I read because in the late
tell nobody.
In the
you
late
were ashamed?
In the late 70s, there were 2 closets you didn't come out of, and that was the other.
Nice.
My goodness. Awesome. So I didn't really read comic books as a kid, like a lot of people obviously here on the channel. Now I did receive my first comic books when I was a kid. I had actually fell out of a treehouse, and I almost ripped my arm off. And I was in the hospital for several days. I had to have a really big time surgery on my arm just so we could save it. Obviously, it's still attached to me. And I ended up staying there for a couple of days. My mom's friend from work named Melissa, she brought me a Spider-Man comic book. I had Spider-Man and Doc Ock on the cover. And then she brought me an Iron Man comic book. And I remember thinking Spider-Man looks pretty amazing. This Doc Ock guy kind of looks like a jabroni. I'm glad he's beating him up. But I always thought Iron Man kind of looked stupid.
I gotta go.
Oh, I'm sorry. It follows me until the Iron Man movie came out. My roommate at the time, he kind of grew up reading comic books. He's like, "Let's go see Iron Man." I was like, "Nah, he looks dumb."
Yeah,
Spider-Man looks way cooler than him.
Nice.
So we can't be friends anymore, Eric. Iron Man's your
guy.
We
can have. Well, Iron Man is the comic the character that I started drawing because Spider-Man was such a pain in the butt to draw, man. It was just too much stuff that I needed to. Yeah, like I needed to get all the webbing right. Iron Man was just like 3 face holes right? And like a circle on his chest. That made it so easy for a kid to copy.
So that was your introduction to comic books? Was that your first favorite, like your first love?
In earnest, it was, what do you call it? Well, my first love was, this is going to date me in a bad way. Have you guys seen those magnetic drawing screens where you could draw and lift up the thing? Mm-hmm. I had one of those as a kid, and on the border of it was nothing but Marvel characters. And so my uncle back then would kind of, I remember him being great, but I suspect if I go back, probably not as good as the drawing, but he would just copy the Marvel characters. And my jerk of a cousin, to piss me off, would lift up a corner and just erase like the Hulk fist or like the Spider-Man hand or something. And I would just go crying to my mom about it. And eventually, well, she would try to draw it, try to fill it in. Eventually, he did it so much, and I got so sick of just crying to my mom, I just started drawing it on my own. And that's what started the love for, like, I think I know how to draw Spider-Man in this pose, but I didn't start in earnest until much later on in junior high, when my buddies found the Mile High Comics mailing list, the mail order. Every month, we would pool all our money and order a bunch of comics that would get delivered, and we would not get the same comics to each of us would not, we'd all order different comics so that we'd cycle them through the month. Hey, I'm done with my 5 copies, you take them, and then I get what you have, and so on and so forth, and we'd share that way. And
that's a very Filipino thing to do with comic books there.
Oh yeah, Eric. I had a bunch of Filipino friends. We were very, very smart. We're $1.25, 75 cents for back in the day.
So here in the Philippines where I live, obviously, Eric, I believe you were born here, but you weren't raised here. You were actually raised, I think, in California.
Yeah.
So in the Philippines back in the day, comics were like a huge part of the culture here.
Sure.
And all the older gentlemen, the Titos or whatever in the neighborhood, when it was new comic book day, they would go buy a copy of every single one, and they would just leave it in the neighborhood, and the kids would all come by and read every issue.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember, and I don't know the name of this, but as a kid, it was like 25 cents. But there was this kid who had he had a magical rooster, and it would turn into like this giant phoenix. Like, I just remember images of this thing when he needed to, like, whatever, he invoked the magic words, and it would turn into like this super powerful phoenix looking thing. And that's the only thing I remember from Filipino comics. I don't even know the name of it. I have to look it up again. Somebody told me once, in one ear, out the other, but that was the thing I read consistently.
I'm going to have to find that. That sounds amazing. A magical rooster?
It is. A magical rooster. I'm going to look it up right now.
So if you haven't noticed, we've actually had another participant here in the stream. Jim, where you been?
I didn't know when we were starting. I actually was sitting there, and I thought we were starting later. I apologize.
Oh, my bad.
I apologize. Yeah, I know that's my fault. I ended up, I was going, I'm looking, I'm like, where are you? Where am I? Oh my goodness. I better get on here. So I apologize to that. I'm sorry about that.
How's your week been? Did you almost die this week?
No, actually, no. I thought maybe I was going to end up running myself over with a lawnmower, but that was just maybe in my mind. I was going, and it got kind of caught.
Were you on a hill?
Well, it was a hill, and it got caught, but luckily it didn't get too far. But this week was pretty good.
You're not a young man, and you have 3 boys in between the ages of like 17 and 25.
Yeah, I do. And I do have 5 boys.
5
boys. One is
Sorry.
only out of the range of that. He's 28, but the others are all in the range, and they won't do anything. I ended up talking, and it's funny, I came on here, and all of a sudden when I heard the rooster, and I thought actually that was like a real thing. I didn't even realize that at that point we were talking about
I thought perhaps the kid in the neighborhood had a magic rooster that produced comic books.
That's what I thought we were getting at. I'm like, boy, I'm glad I showed up now. Like, oh my goodness, a magic rooster. That sounds pretty cool. But yes, I did arrive.
Jim,
I did almost die.
You can tempt your post-pubescent teenage boys, some of them in their 20s that still live with you at home, to go and mow the lawn with a comic book.
No, that's the thing. It's very tough nowadays. I think Yule would even know about that. My kids, they don't get anywhere near comics, mainly because I like them. I think is what ends up happening now. And
my kids still think I'm cool, but they're all under 8.
Yeah, those are the good old days. When they thought I was cool. But yeah, if all I have to do is go down right now and say, I hate doing the lawn, then they may do it just to spite me. Same with comics as well.
Well, there we go. We'll get to Jim here because he has a similar experience as I do getting into comic books. So Eric, you're trading around the comic books. It turns out you can draw the characters and all that. and it turns into a lifelong love. Did you have to keep it in the closet like Breen, or were you able to talk to people about it?
Well, you know, I was pretty much ostracized as a kid and coming up in high school because I read comic books and played Dungeons and Dragons. That was just like an invitation to people not to talk to you. I wasn't very much
exiled to the geek clique, like
absolutely. But you know
lunch
what?
Table in the corner.
Yeah, when you're in that, when you have a group of friends who are also in it with you, it doesn't feel so bad, right? I had like easily 5-6 kids that were all reading comic books, all sort of like watching Saturday morning cartoons and talking that up, and then playing D&D. It was really easy. It wasn't, I mean, the way Breen made it sound, you kind of like, I don't want to talk about comics unless I absolutely have to. And the fact that the kid in the bus thought that he was going to get
stuff. He might have had a girlfriend at the time. He was trying not to lose what he had.
I had 0% of that. 0 car, 0 girlfriend. I had Spider-Man, so he was much better off than I was.
So
he played it
geek
smart.
culture back in the day, you know, you got picked on and stuff all the time.
Yeah.
Like, did you guys watch each other's backs, or when somebody got bullied, did you all book it and be like, I'm glad it wasn't me this time?
Yeah. We all stood in the line and said, which one of us do you want to beat up today so that we can, you know, we can save each other. And then the guy who got picked, and like, we'll see you tomorrow, and I'll give you your copies of your comics.
One for the team, bro.
Yeah, exactly. Nah, there was none of that. I think it was just like you got made fun of because you read Spider-Man, because we read Hulk or whatever it is, but there wasn't any sort of like physical violence involved, at least not that I knew of.
Nobody really messed with me when I was at school either, but that was because a lot of my family was in prison or had been in prison. There's like a little stigma.
They knew your reputation. Yeah.
Well, it wasn't my reputation. It was my family's. I'm a nice guy.
Family rep.
I've never even been arrested.
I don't know where that apple falls.
I'll find out. I don't know how that happened.
Just don't take a chance, man.
So Yule.
Yeah.
You're a little bit older than I am. You start reading comic books. What was the culture like at the time? Was it similar to what Breen had there? Or was your experience similar to what Canete had, you know, obviously being in California?
Well, yeah, you know, when I was a kid, we traded comic books, and this was like, you know, 6th, 7th grade, stuff like that. But I kept reading comics because of my father. We collected it. So we would get a reading copy, a mother-father copy, a me copy, a Michael copy, and a Jeffrey copy. So my brother.
So we got 5 copies of every comic book?
Yeah. So of anything that we bought. So we were getting like post-burn X-Men, and then pre-burn or burn X-Men, then, you know, filling that in. We would get any first issue, all the Alpha Flights, all the Romans.
Oh, you were a dirty speculator even when you were like 10?
Well, it wasn't speculating. It wasn't speculating. It was the concept was
pre-speculating.
It was maybe opening a store later on, you know, that type of thing. And not only that, but each person would have their own comics, so they could do with whatever they wanted, you know, with them. And I ultimately got most of them, whatever my brothers didn't sell off or anything like that. In high school, you know, I still read comics. The cool thing about it was, like, you know, that's when Miracle Man was coming out, and, you know, a bunch of other books. You know, Vertigo hadn't started, but, you know, Vertigo type book
getting right on the edge
stuff
of
like that. Yeah, exactly.
Swamp Thing.
So there were comics aren't just for kids anymore type situations. So, but it didn't really make it cool. I've always been, like, you know, kind of a wider, broader shoulder guy, so no one's going to screw with me too much. But you kind of have this idea or understanding that most people don't think comics are as cool as you do. That's for sure.
It's crazy. Back then, we were more ostracized, you know, being comic book geeks at the time or whatever. But I think there's more hostility nowadays. I think it's because of the internet.
Is there really? Wait, what's the hostility, Wes? What's the...
No, if you just have an opinion on comic books, people will just put you on blast for no reason.
Well, so a lot of the conversation with me and my friends, I had a friend named George, and I always joke, even now, that he always had the worst taste in comic books. So anything that had, like,
so
Iron
he was
Man,
the comic quirks of your circle.
Yeah. Well, he liked Quasar, so of course, you know, yeah, he's a West Coast Avengers fan. You know what I mean?
Oh, boy.
You know, that type of stuff. He was the guy that got every Marvel age, you know. But no, good friend of mine, and you know, we would just, the conversation would be like, that sucks, you know, or oh, this art's horrible. And, you know, part of having a conversation is
Hulk couldn't take Superman.
I like something better than you do. Yeah. Look at this, you know, and whatnot, or that art sucks, or that art's great, or, you know, putting forth the idea of what you think about the comic wasn't as much an insult as a few characters online might, you know, make you think. Yep. You know, it's not. I'm always, you know, you're reading when you read. You can't. A lot of comics, you know, we talk about the creators hating the fans, or, you know, I think part of it is that the creators have an idea of who they would like their fans to be, just not realizing that comic fans are comic fans, and you can't help who likes what you like. And it just, when you're reading a comment from somebody, and maybe it's slightly negative, you know, it's, oh, I don't really like that. You might be reading it as this is like the most horrible thing that a person could possibly write about this situation. Sure. I kind of like take a, you know, like a shield for Spider-Man right now. You know, everybody's hating on it so much, and it's like
blows.
The story is the story. You might not like that it's Spider-Man, but it's not like it's being written horribly. You know, I don't think like anything is.
You didn't think Amazing Spider-Man 25 was written horribly?
Well, I mean, it told the story of what happened. I mean, okay, yeah, it was written horribly.
Thank you. That's all I wanted to hear.
Any comic that does 2 weeks later, 4 months later, 4 years later. So, like, all of comics suck is what we're saying now, because it's happened all the time.
Well, I'm glad that you're on my side now.
I mean, any Rick Remender book sucks. Anything Jonathan Hickman sucks. We might as well go to Claremont, because I'm sure he's done that a number of times. Maybe just not all in one issue, but it's kind of also the writing style of today isn't as. It's not as tight as it used to be.
We're not here to talk about what sucks. What was cool back in the day? So now we have the internet, we have Twitter, we got social media, and we have access to a degree to all these creators whenever. And I think the letters pages were way better to actually keep in contact with fans. Maybe you weren't talking to all of them individually, but I think they could go in there, take out the best questions that a lot of people were asking, and give out good information that really got people excited for the comic books. Those are almost as much fun to read back in the day as the story itself.
I agree. That would be the last thing I would read, or maybe if there was a backup story and I read the letters pages, I would then go on into the secondary story. But it was a part of the comic book that I always look forward to checking out.
Breen, did they have letters pages when you started reading comic books?
Oh yeah, it's like you said, it was something you did kind of look forward to.
Thought maybe it was a telegram or something.
Yeah, I'm going to telegraph something here. It got to where there were people whose names you started recognizing on the letters pages. Yeah, so I'll even ask Buell. Buell, do you remember a guy?
Roboting.
Breen is cutting out a little bit.
Yeah, TM Maple? Are you talking about TM Maple? Oh yeah, you're right.
I remember him. Yeah, Ed Via. There were people. They're basically like professional letter writers.
Yeah.
Weren't those guys internal? Weren't those guys like, you know, staff of the places they were writing letters into? It's kind of like lobbing softball questions into.
No, they did that in the early days at Marvel.
Mm-hmm.
But these were just guys. These were just basically super fans. And if you go back and look at some of the letters pages, you see a lot of people that went on to be writers and artists in the industry.
Oh, that's so cool.
Anybody famously?
Oh yeah, Stan Lee's protege, Roy Thomas,
Mike Barr. I remember seeing letters from him.
Oh, Kurt Busiek shit all over Dark Phoenix Saga in the letters page.
Oh, that feels like a Kurt Busiek take.
It was pretty. He's a prolific letter writer also, though. Yeah.
But doesn't that say something that they are so down for whatever it is that they were reading back in the day? They would write, criticize. Marvel would take it with like a certain grain of salt, still publish it because they knew it was just part of their culture. And at the end of the day, it just goes to show this person is obviously invested in these stories and these characters and on his title, right? That's kind of cool.
Hate or love is what you want. any apathy is the worst thing, right?
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. Good point.
Did you draft up any letters, Yule? You seem like a letter writer.
Yeah, I totally wrote a letter when I thought the Changeling, so that dates me, was going to die because Deathstroke Electra shot at him in the chest. And I had to write a letter in saying that it's not cool that he just
not cool, bro.
I'm so happy it didn't get printed because now you guys don't know what I wrote.
I mean, what? It's so cool that you were like,
yeah. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was gonna say, like, it was so cool that as soon as you read that last panel and some guy getting that sort of like kills, you know, whatever it is that you saw, you're like, I gotta write a letter. You know, it was that was the culture back then. I gotta write a letter about this. Please don't let this guy.
I mean, I was so upset because like there he is laying on a butte, you know, they're like in some desert or something like that. Yeah. And his chest is smoking. And of course, George Perez is awesome and everything. Yeah. And Marv Wolfman's at the height of his career, I assume, or height of his powers. And they're just doing like the best comic that is an X-Men or Spider-Man at the time. And it's just,
you think New Teen Titans was better than X-Men then?
Oh, well, John Byrne wasn't doing it, so I was, New Teen Titans was better.
It was the best one.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, it's a tie. I mean, you know, there's your top selling and always consistent X-Men and Spider-Man, and then you have the right underneath, you know, moving on up, but probably never going to get there. New Teen Titans, and it was. God, it's such a good time to read comics. I love that.
Remember when Deathstroke the Terminator came out? We reviewed it here on the channel. That's an amazing episode. Mm-hmm. Great issue.
Yeah, it was a great issue. Yeah.
Don't forget 1982, the first legitimate crossover. You know, the Superman, Spider-Mans were great. Batman, Hulk, whatever. But the X-Men Teen Titans was basically putting the two biggest things in comics together.
Yeah,
and that was huge.
And didn't that it was so but the thing was that New Teen Titans gained in popularity off of that. And if I'm not mistaken, Marvel was like, we're not going to be doing these for a while.
Is that what they did? They took a policy of like, we're not going to let our competitors.
We're not trying to help anybody out here.
Yeah, there was an Avengers Justice League that was supposed to come out a year later, and that's the one that finally came out in 2003.
Wow, a little different.
Things have changed just a bit in those 20 years. But
Jerry Conway was the writer, if I'm not mistaken. Obviously, George Perez was still the illustrator, but then you get Kurt Busiek and to do a different one.
Yeah, but I said something. I mean, that's probably to your point that when they said we're not going to do these anymore, that might, and then obviously internal or squabbling between the companies. I'm sure.
Sure.
Yeah, it's funny that you mentioned. It's funny that you mentioned that history, Yule, because that was me and my friends. Almost exclusively my pals were, DC collectors, and I was a Marvel guy. So anytime somebody would say, "No, hold on a second, Teen Titans is so much better than X-Men," I'd be like, "No, we can't have this discussion." It would explode into like which one was like it was just fun. Yeah, it's just fun talking back and forth. You know what I mean? And then at the end of the day, you're still pals. You still exchange comics, and it didn't prevent me from reading Teen Titans. I'd still go in there and be like, okay, this is a different look, a different feel to the stories, but it was still a lot of fun.
Getting back on to what you was talking about, writing his letter when he thought the Changeling had died in the comic book. Do you remember when you were invested in these characters and it felt like if he died, they weren't going to come back?
Oh yeah.
At that point, there hadn't been a whole lot of resurrections. So, if a Superman dies, that feels like a big deal. If the Changeling makes or eats it in a comic book, you might never ever see him again at that point. I can see why you had such an emotional experience.
Yeah, I mean, I have no understanding that the comic is going to keep going on for another 10 years or expectation, I should say. And, I'm growing with this character. He's my age, and it's just like, it's funny how
awkward like you.
Yeah, no, he was really cool. Changeling. He knew it was up, and he had green, and he had good head of hair and everything.
Now you're 40 years older than him.
Yule was already going bald when he was 9. Already got like a little shoehorn thing going.
Yeah, totally. Yeah,
I'll tell you when I was reading the Fall of the Mutants story arc, and the X-Men, sacrificed themselves in order for Forge to close up that gate that brought forward those demons that killed his entire platoon. And the only way they can do it was to sacrifice their souls in order to close it, right? At the end of that, as they were saying their goodbyes, I was bawling. I was crying so hard because these characters that I love so much are about to die. And right at that opportune moment, my mom walks in, and Filipino mom, typical, goes like, "Who died?" You know, like she always like, if you're crying and you're like, she immediately goes like, "Who died?" And my answer, be it, trying to talk through my tears, was like, "The X-Men." And she's like, "Go outside," you know, like I was crying. She goes like, "Go outside, don't cry,
go ride
for
your bike,
comic books. Yeah, go do something with real people."
Yeah. I think
yeah,
my
no,
mom
right.
walked in at other weird times, not comic book stuff at points.
You were crying during that?
No, well, yeah, probably because I wasn't getting the real stuff. Yeah, I'm there crying to myself, apologizing. I was going to say about you wanting to write in or writing in to the deal. It was cool, though, because people who actually reacted to, say, a death or things like that, they were real fans. It wasn't just a random person, right? Obviously, they wouldn't write into a comic book. So when you did have some outrage or some people upset, it was real. It was actually the people reading the comics, not just like now with social media, that everybody, they see a headline and just react to it. So that's what the cool thing was. Though I did end up, a couple years ago, I did have a guy bet me that I couldn't get into a letters column deal. So I actually did write into, I think it was Saladin Ahmed's Miles Morales, and the guy bet me $50, and I got it. I got in.
Absolutely. You're probably the only one writing a letter.
Exactly that. And I said, can I pick the book? And that's why I picked that. But also I pretended that I was just a little kid and I was kissing butt. That's how you do it now. They just want, nice praise. Yeah. They would never, print anything bad now.
So you've been like imitating being a kid?
They must win $50. Don't do that.
Well, it's $50, I guess.
Yeah. It was funny. At one point, it was the other part of the bet was to get on like a trade dressing with a review, but I couldn't go on, and make up something like that. I have too much integrity to actually do that.
Children of the Atom is the comic book for an entire generation. Jim.
Vita Ayala, voice of my times. Yeah, I couldn't do that.
But also something to be said about that, right? The writers back then, or at least the storylines back then, knew how impactful a death would be because we were all so invested. And they just didn't take it out anytime that we need a big event here. Somebody's going to die. It never, they kind of knew how to write around, at least from my recollection, they knew how to write an event where it is actually an event without having to dip into, hey, somebody's got to die in order for this to happen,
We didn't have, but it was like when Wes said, we didn't have resurrections, like we did. We always had, we had a lot of like, oh, Gwen Stacy's back. There was a lot of like screwing around like that, but she didn't come back. Ben Ben's dead. Uncle Ben's dead. And we've got, Clark Kent's parents are going to stay dead, that type of stuff. They're not coming back, but now everybody can come back. And
Jason Todd and Bucky just ruined it for everybody. Winter Soldier and Red Hood hadn't been so popular. Maybe.
Dude, do you remember how big of a deal that was when Robin died? That was so huge for me and my friends. We were like, they're going to kill Robin? That doesn't make any sense. And the fact that they turned it into an event when what was it? People were calling in for that, weren't they? To
they had a hotline where you could.
That's so cool.
Yeah. That was so rigged a little.
Was it
rigged to kill him? Really? I didn't.
There's a guy that had a phone.
I see.
And he was calling in, but he did have to pay, like, I think a nickel or something every time.
The money was spent.
But still, that was a big deal, right?
Yeah.
The fact that they were having fans, involved, participate in the continuity of a character, that's pretty damn cool.
What's also cool is it affects Batman for like 3 years straight. Like he's not the same character after that.
Yeah.
Sure.
DC would also yearly have a who's going to be leader of the Legion of Superheroes, and people would write in, and vote basically, and that would be the leader of the team, and that was
and I could definitely see you voting for Brainiac 5 or whatever.
Oh, a green guy, totally,
green guy,
and he's hanging out with Supergirl. Come on,
Saturn Boys, where it's at.
Saturn.
Do you guys remember well, this is again X-Men centric for me, but I remember when they would release the annuals and there would be a cool artist or a concept that would then, I think they'd roll it from time to time into the main continuity, then that would be the lead up to the event of that year, because that was almost it was an annual event or a semi-annual event where a new thing would be happening. That was really cool. I started picking up on that way later. I was like, oh, this is where they set this character up, this bad guy up, or this plot line up in this big annual, you know.
X-Men had the coolest events because it would take place in like 3 different episodes or issues or series for like 3 months straight. So you end up getting like 9 issues in it, and it'd be really big.
Yeah.
Yeah,
that would be a burden.
Buy those other books.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, even at 75 cents, it would be such a burden to try to go figure out how it's impacting things like X Factor and New Mutants. I didn't care, you know, like I care how it's extinction agenda.
Like they could never do Age of Apocalypse again because of the internet and the way that they have to do solicitations just to get people to order it. Where all of a sudden you didn't know it was going to happen. You show up at your comic shop, you show up at the spinner rack, and your book's not there anymore. It's got a completely different title because everything has changed.
Right. That was cool. That was great. And the art carried a lot of that for me, where I was like, whoa, what do these guys look like? They were all being redesigned, and they all had a different history. They all had a different future. That was so neat.
As an X-Men stan at the time, Eric, like, did you buy into it? Do you think it was never coming back?
Of course. There was nothing that was going to convince me otherwise. I was so annoyed by it that, you know what I mean? I was like, this is the like, my long boxes were populated with nothing but Uncanny. And here comes Marvel going, none of that. We're changing all of it. We're going to move in this direction. And, like, you know, nothing would have told me otherwise. You know, there was no hint that they were ever going to go back until my friend was like, I bet you they're going to revert this back. And I was convinced. I was like, no, this is it. This is it moving forward. It's never going back. Yeah, it was a great conversation. It was a garage full of kids just like telling each other that this isn't coming back and it's going to be this way moving forward.
You should have wrote a letter.
Yeah.
Like, I demand.
Yeah, you need to bring back. What year was that? What year was I'm trying to recall when that happened.
94? I can't, something like that.
Age of Apocalypse was Joe Mad run, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, when he was doing things. That was actually, out of anything, that was the part that was pissing me off more. I was like, come on, Joe, just do more than 2 issues at a time. You know, stay on
95. They had just started Generation X with Bachalo, and it immediately was. Does this sound like anything? Immediately after like the 3rd issue, it's like a whole new title,
right?
And it's like all on hiatus, and it's like, oh my gosh, what's going on here? I mean,
the good thing is they never told you about it, so it was like it just like slammed you right in the face when you saw the comic book. Like,
right. I mean, we knew something was coming, but we didn't. I mean, they didn't say that. Oh, don't worry, it's going to be okay. It was only a few months.
With social media, they would have been pumping it up for 6 months.
Yeah. I think back then they didn't need to. They appreciated and really valued that anticipation that led into that big reveal. Right? They didn't need to hype it up in some weird, manufactured and saccharine way. You're like, oh, you got to experience it. I remember when they were building up to Kingdom Come, the first time I saw ads for that, and they didn't tell you anything, right? They just showed Alex Ross right after his Marvels run, and you thought, like, what are they going to do with DC? Because it was like, oh, is it going to be a similar retreading of where they were coming from when it came to Marvels? And it was like, nope, something completely different, and that blew my mind in a completely different way. That was great. That was so fun.
I loved it when DC would write like a lot of stories out of continuity, and it didn't matter how good they were never going to be a part of continuity, so they had like freedom to do whatever they wanted. Now they try to stuff anything that's popular like into the continuity itself and end up breaking everything on top of itself.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember when they rolled Kingdom Come into continuity, and you're like, there's no reason to do that. It's like it's great.
It's on its possibility.
Yeah.
Kind of thing in the future. Marvel used to have the corner on the what if stuff, though. They had some cool concepts there, and then half the what if stuff ends up being real. Like, what if Jane Foster was Thor? That's where that idea came from, right?
Conan made it into the Marvel U, so
I mean, Conan was an Avenger.
there was a Marvel team up where Kulan Goth transforms Mary Jane into Red Sonja. So kind of like tangentially, you know, and not only that, he was a villain in X-Men and Avengers and stuff like that also. But Conan hadn't been in the Marvel U yet.
Oh, that's cool.
I love me some good Conan comics. Did you guys read the new Titan stuff? I know we're talking about old stuff. Did you read that new Titan one from Jim Zub? The Zero issue came out on.
I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
I did not like Marvel's take for the most part on Conan.
The only way I even hear about comics, like new comics, is when you guys are talking about it, because I haven't picked up new comics in what feels like forever.
Last time you were on the channel, you were having to take notes on all the stuff you needed to read.
I bought a ton of it. A lot of
you didn't get Ambassadors #3.
Oh, you should have.
Don't tell Mark, but I have.
Wait. Actually, you didn't get Ambassador. You know, Frank Quietly did #1, right?
Listen, I'll say this out of complete humbleness, right? But
you don't like Frank Quietly, I know.
I don't like Mark Miller. No, I'm just kidding. It's when Mark is about to release everything of the group of people that he works with, right? He releases it to us to go and read and check out and say, hey, here's a preview of it. Come and check it out. So I have the amazing privilege of being able to read it ahead of time.
That's cool.
Did you start like nagging him, like, listen, couldn't we have gotten a better artist for issue 3? Like,
this guy, nobody knows who he is. Yeah. He doesn't do anything. No name? Come on. He doesn't do Arc Athena.
I sit in the background and I know I'm in privileged company, so I don't say anything. So they're
absolutely on that Ambassador series. Like I saw the preview of that as well. It was like I don't want to kiss your ass, but damn. This is kind of my reaction to that one. So. Breen, you came back. What happened to your computer?
It's in its death throes.
Oh. It's like it's on the bed. Get the last
resuscitate.
Rites.
Yeah. That's what I'm trying to get through today and tomorrow. I'm going to get a new computer. I think sometime next week. It's like I said. It's got one in the grave and one on the peel right now.
So there's another member of this panel that has a different experience getting into comic books. So Jim, we already know that you pretend to be a child.
Yeah.
To talk about comic books every once in a while. Yeah, is that how you got into comic books when you were in your 40s?
No, I actually have a crazy deal. I like stuff like Dungeons and Dragons and Star Wars, all that stuff growing up.
Cred.
I am. I'm trying to get my cred. But I didn't really have that many friends. So, the idea of trying to, get people to get involved in that stuff, it's pretty tough. Now, one of the early things, I used to get my aunt from England would send me the Dandy, if you ever saw that nonsense. And I used to like stuff like comic strips and things like that. But really, my big problem is I never really had anybody to talk to comics about. So I ended up just getting into sports. I ended up being, in any sport. So, I wanted to preface it because I didn't want to make it seem like I bullied people because of being, oh, look at him, he was doing sports and stuff. But it was, I just didn't have anybody to get into it. And trying to do it myself, everything was just, number 700, number 300. So later on, I just ended up finding out about the New 52. And that is what got me into it. I ended up hearing, okay, they're rebooting. Everything's going to be #1. I'm going to jump in. And I started and I loved it. I ended up, because of that, was my entry in. So when I hear people really pish-posh the New 52, I don't get angry, but it's kind of a shame because that is what got me into everything. And I realize now, because, once I got into it, I started reading everything and going around, that I realized, I see why people were against it and what happened. But I did end up jumping in then, and it was such a variety of titles and crazy stuff that it ended up getting me, introduced to not just comics, but DC comics like Dial H. Like, all of a sudden that came out, and I'm like, that was from before, and I'd read stuff before. But the first book that I read was Jeff Johns' Aquaman. And it's funny. Yeah, and it's funny because when I jumped into it, I didn't have any sort of things in my mind. I had watched some cartoons and things as a kid. I didn't think like Aquaman was a joke. I didn't realize that. I don't ever get the joke about that. I actually used to think he was really cool. I'd love to,
I watched
talk
Super
to
Friends.
fish and exactly.
He was a fish dude that rode on a scooter on the ocean. He could swim. He didn't need to do that.
Well, that's
I never
cool,
really saw him on
though,
a
right?
scooter. Some time I saw him on a
And then he
seahorse.
rides on
Seahorse.
fish too. I mean, it's crazy.
It's called a seahorse. What do you think it's supposed to be used for, Yule?
Yeah, you put that saddle on it and away you go.
Jesus.
Now, what he was an ocean cowboy, and that's pretty cool.
I love Super Friends growing up.
That would be cool for Aquaman if he was actually an ocean cowboy.
Ocean
I would
cowboy.
dig that. That would like he's Old West, you know, he's going solving crimes, he's going town to town underwater. I like that.
Pretty good take on the
cool.
character. I like Super Friends. My favorite was Apache Chief.
I love the Apache Chief.
He didn't show up in enough episodes though, Wes. He was like all of 4 episodes, right?
Yeah, but every time he showed up, he got enormous, and he would fight that enormous tiger lady or whatever.
Yep. Yeah, that was cool. And so when I was reading the comics and stuff like that, I actually ended up, loving almost everything and not realizing that some of the stuff that I was reading, like I didn't have
the
people
Grant
to talk
Morrison
to.
Superman stuff.
No, you mean the Action Comics deal? I
That
wasn't
was
really that
was
down with that.
unfortunate, that series.
Yeah,
that was an unfortunate. I was so looking forward to that, and I'm like, Rags Morales is going to be on it. Grant Morrison's going to kill it. And then it was the shirt and jeans shit.
The jeans, yeah.
It
was tough.
There was a cool 3-parter where we see the destruction of Krypton.
Yep.
And Laura, is that her name? She's like running on lights of like energy, and like she's like dodging laser blasts and stuff. That was kind of cool. I forget who the artist was.
What was the decision making to put Superman in jeans and a T-shirt?
It was his early
modern
days.
audience.
Yeah.
Well, I thought it was. They were trying to. So the New 52, they had current day Superman written by George Perez, and they had 5 years prior at the beginning of the DCU.
Oh,
Superman.
is that what it was?
So he didn't have a costume, and stuff like that.
Right.
But Batman already had like 15 Robins.
Yep. Yeah, they were all there.
It doesn't make any sense.
He runs through those every 3 months.
Yeah, and I can see Breen back in the day, pack of smokes, rolled up in his shirt, runs into Jim for the first time at the comic shop. Jim talking about the New 52 is amazing, and Breen just slapping the piss out of him.
Just beating me
Don't
up.
you ever disrespect comics again.
And it came full circle, I'd yell.
You're not welcome here.
And that's the funny thing is, when I first got in, I didn't realize what was cool to talk about. So I really wanted to talk to people about it, which I didn't have back in the day. So I end up like reading stuff. Man, do you read that Identity Crisis? That's the best thing I ever read. And then people were attacking me. It was online. I'm like, oh, what happened? I thought that was really good. And I didn't realize at that point, and even at that point, it became real cool, it seemed, online to really talk about Killing Joke being the worst thing ever and that it was abusive and all that sort of thing. Sure. And I read that and it blew my mind. I was like, this is obviously it's one of the greatest. And people were, I just kept getting attacked. I ended up anything that I decided to read next and like. And so I did kind of teeter on this point of like, maybe I'm not. Social media almost ruined it for me. The idea of maybe I just won't get into this and stuff like that. Because right before that, and I tend to have, issues where I'll laser focus on one thing. And before that, it was video games for years upon years. And then it was comics. So I said, maybe I'll go back to them video games because everything that I decided I liked, I was just getting yelled at online. And so I ended up deciding, screw it, I'll just make a website and review stuff and have a podcast so I could just, yell at them. So that's kind of the deal. I kind of ended up doing that. And, but yeah, it was weird. Like back in the day, I did read, or at least started reading some. Kingdom Come was one of the things that always did intrigue me. I saw that at our library, and I didn't have a lot of money growing up, so I couldn't really buy tons of things. But as it went on, some of the things like a Kingdom Come always did intrigue me. I just never really got into reading them because I didn't have many people to talk to about it.
Kingdom Come as a series was a reaction to what had been happening previously, right? Like it was like a recentering of, hey, here is the bombastic version of how to tell big superhero comics without having to resort to all that had happened in that Image run where everything was just about like the over glorification of something that didn't mean anything, if that makes any sense. Like they were just doing big guns, big bloody battles. Just everything was big for the sake of like, it's like the worst version of a Michael Bay movie, you know, where it's just like, oh, here's a spectacle, but it doesn't have any weight behind it. Kingdom Come said you can do that without having to resort to like this empty calorie of an experience. And I think that's why it landed so profoundly with me, where it was like, oh, somebody dialed in all the stuff that I was attracted to when it came to when it came to Image Comics, but then it's doing it with these characters where there's actually weight, where there's actually consequences, and there was actual characterization, which I had completely lost track of reading all of these new comics that were coming out in the late 90s. So Kingdom Come did it the best for me. I was like, oh, right, that's how you do that well.
And most importantly, the characters' heads were proportionate to the rest of their bodies.
That's overrated, man.
Kingdom Come was overrated?
You didn't no, I mean
normal size heads.
Normal size heads.
Oh yeah, no, I don't shoot. Styles wise, I'm the wrong guy to talk to about like proportion
what
to body.
What is the most hate you've gotten for your art on a comic that you did?
Spider-Man.
Without a doubt. Spider-Man. Spider-Man fans are some of the. I remember it was Damian Scott also. He did a Peter Parker, and a lot of people really hated that too.
There was a short period of time, and again, I'm completely checked out of it, but there was a short period of time when they were trying to get Spider-Man as close to the movies as possible, like Tobey Maguire Spider-Man. So proportionally, everything needed to look realistic. Everything needed to have like the webbing that looked like it was made out of rubber. Right. So the moment somebody said, I'm not going to draw that, I'm going to try something else, even if it was for one issue, it broke expectation. And they said like, oh, that's the worst thing ever. Do you not know how to draw? You know, like it was the whole bit. But there was a generation previous to that. We're talking like Eric Larson, you know, Todd McFarlane, you know, a little bit of Bagley from way back in the day that were trying a bunch of different looks to Spider-Man. So I was trying to inhabit that spirit, and my editors got my back.
What do you think about when artists are like trying something and the fans just can't handle it? Kind of like I'm going to pick Riley Rossmo.
Riley Rossmo.
Yeah, I think that's a really good example where people are like, this is shit. But I'm like, this isn't shit. And I mean, when a lot of times what happens is we find out later on, like 5 years later, 10 years later, like, oh, I mean, I'm not saying that the stuff that he's doing now with the weird heads and stuff is going to be, you know, emulated or looked at, you know, fondly. But, you know, he's done other things. It's not always like that. And people can really, really hate on somebody when they're trying something different. Music, movies, books. Melville, when he stopped doing pirate books or whaling books, the fans hated him, you know. So what do you think about that?
Well, I remember we were talking about this offline just before we went live. We were talking about how every Jim Aparo conversation ends up becoming like a Norm Brayfogle conversation. I remember looking through that, going like, this isn't Jim Aparo. What is this? You know, like super stylistic, super expressive stuff. But I think, at least, you know, again, taste being completely subjective, I think if it fits the story that they're trying to tell, I think that's the metric that I go by, which is like, are they trying to tell a serious story with like super cartoonish thing that doesn't seem to work very well? That to me is like the razor, right? But some, you know, again, taste being subjective. Maybe it doesn't work for that story, and that's why people are having an allergic reaction to it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, it certainly doesn't work for the story for Riley Rossmo. I don't think at all. But another big change that we've seen lately, Yul, is Liam Sharp going away from his pencil and ink style to like a more abstract painted style for comic book. And you can see the guy's a master illustrator. He's a very good comic book artist. He's a good visual storyteller. And while I don't always love the new art, I do appreciate it, and it certainly fits the characters and stories that he's telling. So while I would prefer his older style, which I think is superior to what he's doing with the painted style, I can still see the greatness in the painted style.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, and if you follow him on Twitter, you see him talk about his working in the industry. He doesn't say numbers or anything like that, but he'll say something like a project fell through, or something is doing very well, or something's not doing very well. And we have seen, it looks like with his newer style or his examining it, people just aren't latching on, like, you know, I mean, it's not mainstream, number one. You know, anything for Image or Kickstarter or whatever is not Marvel DC. And then on top of it,
he also did that in Batman the Reptilian.
Well, what I'm saying is,
Batman book.
Well, that's true. It's rough. I mean, when you're not doing Batman, you're not doing Spider-Man, you're not doing X-Men. Number one, it's going to be hard to sell. And then you add another style that people aren't, you know, where you didn't make your career doing. That's going to be rough. It's tough being an artist, I would assume.
Well, plus you're going through a transition stage right now, and a lot of people have already done it, to where you're going from the paper where you're doing it on the pages. Now you're doing it digitally. What looks better digitally? I think a lot of the digital coloring looks kind of bad, so you're having to find out the way to do it the best nowadays with the new tools available.
Yeah, I love Liam Sharp. I thought that the problem with that Starhenge when he was doing that is he really wanted to like flex and have 80 styles in one book, and a lot of people
I thought Starhenge was brilliant.
I thought the art was great, but a lot of people that I talked to, it almost felt like where you'll complain, oh my God, why did that one book have 5 artists? The problem was it was him doing all 5 things, and it looked great, and it was amazing, and it really made you like, look at this, like this guy can do all that. But I think that it was jarring to a lot of people, and yeah, that book deserved to get, you know, all the accolades it got. Unfortunately, it didn't do as well as he, I guess, wanted to, but it did look great. Even when he did the Green Lantern with Grant Morrison, he got, you know, really wacky with that, but it fit the book, like we were saying.
Yeah, I thought the art in that book was amazing. I just thought the writing was awful.
Well, the writing was wacky. Everything was wacky, but you could look at it and really enjoy it, but it got a little wacky.
No, so see, now I think Green Lantern, when we go 5 or 10 years later, you're going to go back and read that and say, this is some cool stuff.
Probably.
Because I always feel that way about Grant Morrison. It takes a while to catch up to him.
Well, that's the thing about Riley Rossimo. If we're talking about him in 5, 10 years, let's say 10 years from now, at least you're going to be able to say, oh, that's Riley Rossimo. I mean, he has such a distinct style, whether you like it or not. And I'm not a huge fan. And he is one that it's not just the idea. It is fitting a book. You have to make sure you fit the book with him.
What do you call it? People rioted. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but when they released Generation X and Bachalo was drawing it, people did not like it. People
that is not like, an X artist at all.
Yeah, but you know, I remember that run. Yeah, I remember that run. He was coming right off of what, like Death Time of Your Life or whatever it was, and I remember being. I really loved that. But that's where I was like, I don't know if this style fits this book, the stories that they're trying to tell with this book, which is like high adventure kids, like, you know, basically taking up the mantle of New Mutants. But that, to me, when I think back, I'll remember that. Ashley Wood doing Ghost Rider 2099. I was like, that probably didn't work for back in the day, but I have an appreciation for it looking back. You know,
it worked for me.
Yeah.
Well, who's this guy that isn't Sienkiewicz?
Right. Oh, and then about that, right? Like Sienkiewicz on New Mutants, people were like, I don't know about this, and it doesn't fit New Mutants. Well.
I was ready for that one when they said he's coming, because I was already on Moon Knight. Yeah, and he's coming to New Mutants, the book. Like, I really liked New Mutants at the time, and then you get that Cannonball cover the month before he got on the book.
Right.
Oh my God! But I had a buddy. He said his sister could draw better than Sienkiewicz, and I'm like, you're fucking crazy! You're crazy! How can you say that? I don't even know if he likes the guy now, but I'm like, this guy is. You know, we had a time when I can name a bunch of artists like this, like Mazzucchelli. We had a time when Bill Sienkiewicz did a monthly comic book. We had a time when Marvel deemed it worthy to have a Charles Vess cover or an issue of Spider-Man or P. Craig Russell and Barry Windsor Smith on a monthly comic book, you know? Just amazing. And we're never going to have, like, who are those guys now, I wonder?
Jorge Jimenez, maybe Marco Cicchetto.
But
we have the benefit of hindsight, though, right? Like,
well, for sure.
Yeah, I remember when Paul Smith picked up on X-Men, and people were just like, "I don't know about this," because he was picking up for who was it previous to him? Was it Cockrum that was before? Yeah. So can you imagine going from that really highly rendered Dave Cockrum work and going right into Paul Smith? And it was basically a coloring book where it was, you know, people were overreacting to how simplistic it was. But looking back now, you know, just based on your reaction, we can both go like, holy cow, how good is that? You know,
if he would have stayed on that book longer, I might have to give it to him. You know what I mean? As an ex-artist, I mean,
for sure.
It was like I was when I was reading X-Men
over Mark Silvestri.
Oh yeah, easy. Easy. Paul Smith all day, all the time. Sorry. Firstly, the stories are better. Sorry. I mean, there's some really good ones. If you want my favorite X-Men in the 200s that Claremont wrote, I figured it out, are all in the 230s. You have that 3-part Brood storyline, and you have the Genosha storyline. But you know what the problem is like Silvestri, I don't even think did any of this. It was like Leonardi and somebody else.
Sure.
But man, Paul Smith, that guy was so good.
In his prime.
Yeah. I mean, even now he does like little drawings, and I see him on Twitter. He's amazing. I like his stuff.
This kind of brings up something we were talking to before we got started here. You were talking about going to San Diego Comic-Con back in the day, Eric.
Oh, yeah.
Where you didn't have to buy tickets 3 months in advance. You didn't have to book a hotel a year in advance. You could drive down there, go up to the window, and actually get a ticket to San Diego Comic-Con.
Yeah, but that's because we were talking about it in the spirit of the conversation. Was like nobody would look twice at a comic book, a comic book, much less a comic book convention, Yeah. So the fact that there was this thing that was held there annually, you just walk up to the window day of, and it was like, I can't remember because I was broke as hell, but thinking in contrast now, like that's nothing to get into a 4-day show, right? And you'd pile into my friends and I couldn't afford, hotels either. So, well, you'd go there. It'd be like, we'd be in my buddy's beat up Honda Civic, piled in there with 3 days, 4 days worth of clothes, sleeping 5 people in a Motel 6 that was 10 blocks away from the show. And you could get in there day of. Right, so it was easy to get into that. I can't remember what event that took place. The one I remember was the Twilight. Somebody from waiting in line for the Twilight cast got hit by a car because the line was so big. Right, they were standing on the street on the median, and they got into a car. Like I just remember, like, whoa, this is out of control. Yeah. That was the thing that made me go, oh, we can't go there day of anymore. Hotels were getting bought out left and right. But when it was primarily a comic book show, boy, that was so much fun.
Do you miss when conventions were mostly comic books and not just pop culture events?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. When there was no such thing as Hall H. When it was like that comic book show is now sort of like spilling out at the seams. They could barely do 2 halls worth of it way back in the day. Like you couldn't populate that entire convention center.
And it changed your entire career.
I wouldn't say. Well, it changed my outlook. It made me go.
Because you were trying to be the next Jim Lee, and you saw the Iron Man poster.
Oh yeah, no, that was right. I got sent home I went home dejected from those shows back when Jim Lee blew up, and I was like, I was telling you guys this offline. I was like, well, I guess it's time to start going to junior college, and like out of nowhere, one of my heroes gave me a call and said, "How would you like to come work on my show?" And that changed my career.
It changed your entire art style.
You took your portfolio to San Diego and was like, will you take a look at my stuff and
dude,
look at editors and other artists and stuff like that? Yeah.
I couldn't get anybody to pee on me if I was on fire because I was drawing in a style that nobody was hiring at that time.
Try taking a script. Nobody wants to read a script.
So you're the other published comic book creator here on the panel.
That's right. I've been an editor for like a hot second, and I when you're editing someone that's doing their own book, there's no editing going on.
Were you on the con scene? You were scripts in hand trying to get the.
I took about.
What was that like, you going over there?
Oh, it was back in the day when you had to do a file story, and like hopefully someone will take a look at it. And so you write a 3-sentence synopsis, maybe 3 pages of script showing what you can do, maybe an outline also, I think.
Yeah.
And then you take it to someone and you find out your crappy printer isn't what somebody wants you to print it on, or you put a period or a decimal, all sorts of shit nobody cares about in comic books anymore. And you're getting nitpicked And all I want to do is get someone to like pay attention to it. And
but here's the thing,
you know,
as daunting as it was, right? That it was still incredibly exciting to be in that space. Like every year, I don't care if I knew I was going to go in there and get beat up, but it was so exciting. Sometime in the middle of summer, you know, we're going to take a drive down to San Diego from Los Angeles. And I was excited. It's weird to say, but I was excited to get beat up. You know, it's like, I can't wait to show my portfolio and see other people's portfolio standing in this line with me. That was a lot of fun.
I had a buddy that drew up a story that I wrote with him. And we had like a 38-page comic book that I printed up. And we took all our money, or all the money I could get when we went to San Diego. And I sold my Sandman statue to some dude that was signed by Kelly Jones and Neil Gaiman. And so I sold it to him so I could get the money, get the printing, go to San Diego. And I passed these comics, you know, like Peter David. My girlfriend took it over to Neil Gaiman, Peter David, other writers, other editors, and stuff like that. Very embarrassing. But it's out
cool.
there. Yeah, that's what really I would
cool.
do, you know? I mean, you figure no one's going to read words anymore, so I definitely need pictures to go along with it. And that's what we did. And that was what San Diego was about.
You should have went to the bar and bought him a drink.
Yeah, that's I should have, but I don't think.
Was there a bar scene back in the day? Like I don't remember it.
There was no bar caught at San Diego back in the 90s.
Well, not for Yule.
Yeah, no. You needed to know the secret handshake to get into some of these places.
I mean, I met some pretty cool people when my buddy actually got into work at Extreme and then eventually at Marvel. I met people. You know, I went to the offices. I met a lot of people that do more things outside of comics now than they did then, especially if we're talking Extreme Studios, you know? So I remember thinking, oh, this Dan Fraga, what an ass. But I was too cool for school, you know, because I'm not working.
Right.
You know?
My goodness.
Yeah.
So, Breen, you've probably written more comic book scripts than anybody on the panel here. Did you ever take them to a con? Did you ever have someone try to take a look at them?
No, I just did it recreationally, and they weren't really scripts either. I just kind of wrote them long form.
How many are there?
Oh God, I don't know. There's probably up north of 10,000 pages.
Oh,
you have what synopses for titles?
No,
like
nothing like that. No. I created my own thing, and I just wrote as something to do.
So you have 10,000 pages worth of comic scripts.
Well, writings. I mean, it's nothing like panel one. This happens here, kind of thing. I just kind of wrote, and I had a friend that was dabbling in comic book art, but he couldn't really get anything done. Yeah, because he was always other stuff came up, and it just kind of faded away over time.
Faded away 10,000 pages.
Yeah,
that doesn't fade. 10,000 pages.
That's a lot of work. That's years.
Half a trash island is a Breen script.
I don't understand. A page might just have 3 words on it, and then he just files it.
Well,
Every once in a while,
Breen? Is it horror? What is it?
God, the best. I hate doing it's such and such meets such and such, but I guess
no, don't do that. You just tell us what's the genre.
Well, it's vampire related, but not in the way anybody else does it. It's more like.
Well, don't give it away. You might want to sell it one day.
No. That's
it'll vampires.
It'll never. Yeah, I just did it more like. Okay, if a teenage guy was a vampire and he had a girlfriend and the girlfriend wants him to come meet the parents and invites him for dinner, what do? You can't eat technically, and how do you get around that kind of stuff? But
is this a love story? Is this a romance?
It sounds like slice of life vampire stuff.
It was more like it was more like. I mean, there were definitely soap elements to it, but you know,
goddamn, Brave and the Bold got you.
This might be the comic book that would get women into comics again. We got to make this.
Yeah. Oh God, no! It was misogynistic as hell. Before that was even a thing.
It's like who's coming to dinner with vampires?
Yeah,
it's cool.
But
meet the parents.
Yeah,
and I'd say it's basically. Yes, I had all kinds of characters, all kinds of plots, subplots, this, that, and then. Yeah, just them. It's something to do.
Yeah.
My goodness. Did you have dreams of being a comic book creator, Breen, or was it just a hobby?
I had dreams of being able to go into a comic book shop and seeing my book reduced to a dollar bin. Because
wrong with your book?
everybody's like every book in that dollar bin might represent somebody's, you know, hopes, dreams, or whatever. And I thought it'd be cool to see it in a store one time, but it never got out of development.
Jim, have you written any scripts? I know Gabe has, I believe.
I have not. I
Gabe
actually
does short stories.
Yeah, I have no. Yeah. I actually, when you was saying earlier, it's funny. I actually would want to be more of an editor than actually anything else involved.
I think me too.
You want to be the Heather Ontos.
I do.
I
end up. I'm one of the. I actually like to see what people have done and kind of, you know, maybe mold that a little and stuff like that. I think I'm better suited for that than actually coming up with something myself. Plus, I can throw all the writers and artists under the bus. I end up being scot-free at the end. Right? I blame them for everything, and then I look great. But no, I actually, I'm not one who. I don't pretend that I am good at things, and that would be something. Writing scripts and things, I'm not very good at. So I think
I have like 5 ideas that I think would be viable to turn into like a graphic novel or whatever. But I don't think anybody actually wants to read my comic book, so I haven't taken it anywhere yet.
I knew this channel was going in this direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
All these artists you're accumulating that come on your channel and everything.
Yeah. Oh yeah, Canete has just been champing at the bit for an opportunity to illustrate one of my books.
I just need to get Arc Athena done, and it's ready. It's ready to go.
Wait, why not do it, Wes? I mean, we were talking before, and you will hit on this. Was like you had to sell a bunch of expensive stuff to be able to print a comic. Nowadays, it costs almost $0 to get things off the ground, especially by contrast.
You gotta have interest. I don't think anyone watches the channels is like, man, I bet Wes would make a really good sci-fi comic book.
I don't know, man. Who knows?
Like, this jabroni is kind of entertaining. That's about it, though. I'll probably try it one day, maybe. We'll see.
Dude, take it off of your bucket list. Worst thing to do is look back and be like, I never did anything with that.
You know, Wes, you spurred me on. You on one show, you were like, you must have a Superman story. You're a big Superman fan. And I was thinking to myself, like I had an idea at one time, but I didn't really have a concrete story. And so on a walk, thinking about what you were telling me, you were saying on the show, I came up with like an 8-page Superman story. I was like, you know, in my head, I know exactly the beginning, the middle, the end. I know exactly how it needs to be paced and everything. And, you know, maybe someday I'll commission that to be done. But I do have my Superman story now. Yeah, you know, maybe something like that.
Man, I'm like a muse.
Yeah. Well,
I also inspired Jim. He didn't want a YouTube channel, so I was like, what are you doing?
Nope,
you're recording hundreds of hours of podcast every month. You're not putting anything on YouTube?
Yeah, nothing at all. And you said it, and I'm like, screw it. Let's do it. I always need something like
growing,
that.
Jim.
Yeah, it is growing a bit. So, but yeah, again, kind of going back to the whole deal where you ask, hey, do you have anything, scripts and things? I kept seeing people who would start, say, a review site, and really all they wanted to do was kiss butt, so that they think that they're going to become, the foot in the door thing, and that would always upset me as well.
Yeah.
And you could always tell those people that it's not the right way to do it. It never works out, or you know, most of the time it doesn't. You know, Heather Ontos might be the.
Well, the thing is like guys like Donnie Cates did that though.
Yeah,
and there are good people.
Kelly Thompson did that.
Sure,
I believe.
Sure.
Yeah,
and like I think about going back to San Diego and taking a script down there. I had I was lucky. There was a meet and greet with Steven Seagal, who was actually him and a couple other writers were looking at stuff, and possibly this is one of the reasons why he was one of the ones like a typo, stuff like that. But I wish that he would have just known ahead of time to tell me you really need to suck up to these internet sites. Stop working with artists; they're not important anymore, But he didn't know that, so
Speaking of Superman, do you know how hard it is to draw a good Superman, like a good iconic? Everyone's going to be able to pick this out because there's I can't draw Superman.
You have to have a good pose when he's flying, otherwise you've done nothing.
But not only that, you got to draw him like, I don't know how like, it's difficult for me to draw Superman because I draw ugly people, you know. So when I try to draw that guy in that really sort of like,
Bruce Timm has drawn an iconic one, chin and the perfect nose and the curly Q.
Can't do it. It's a giant pain in the butt for me. There's very few people where I look at it and go like, yeah, that's an iconic Superman. You know, like the Jose Garcia Lopez version, a Kevin Nolan.
Now that you mentioned it, I've seen your pictures on Twitter. It's always like snake eyes.
Yeah, because I gotta cover up their faces, man. The moment I try to draw handsome dudes,
that's not true
like
at all.
Boba Fett.
Give me a guy in a mask all day, right? You put Cyclops where you have to cover up like a third of their face. I'm on board. The moment you have me draw Superman,
Snake Eyes, what a great character. Remember back in the day, whenever there was a good toy coming out, you get a comic book to go with it. Yeah. Maybe even get a breakfast cereal with a comic book. Do that.
Full transparency, I did not know that there was a G.I. Joe comic book for the longest time. All I knew was
you thought it was just a cartoon?
Yeah, that's all I knew. Toys and cartoon. It took a while for somebody to go.
But they advertised the comic book on the cartoon, if I'm not mistaken.
Did they? I don't remember.
I remember. I'm sure I remember. Like, she was in the pages of G.I. Joe.
On the cartoon? I would.
Well, not on the cartoon, like, during commercials.
I don't remember.
Because it's not a toy, I think they could advertise during that. Because you're not supposed to advertise G.I. Joe toys during the G.I. Joe cartoon.
Eventually they couldn't do it anymore. Right? Like, but I remember distinctly. Yeah. I remember distinctly as soon as that Transformers commercial kicked on, or excuse me, the bumper to the commercials kicked on, you would see Transformers toys. You would see G.I. Joe toys. I don't remember the comic book. It took my buddy Jesse to show me that those things existed. I remember that G.I. Joe yearbook and I'm like, what the hell is this? Because the cover was so dang
Snake Eyes
sophisticated.
Declassified?
No.
Man, that thing is brilliant. It's Snake Eyes, coming back from Vietnam, and then he meets like Cobra Commander, and they just start beating people up across America. It's amazing. I loved it. It was so good.
Marvel or was it IDW?
I believe it's IDW. I think it's. I can't remember exactly which one it was.
Was that a Chucky Dix comic?
I think it's Larry Hama. Let me.
Oh, Larry Hama. Well, I know he does the Greatest Americans. Still,
it's been a while since I read this one. Brandon Jurwa. Whoops.
Whoa, really?
Wow. But it's based off all the Larry Hama stuff. Like they basically took all the backstory that he had come up with, and they turned it into this series.
And it's just Snake Eyes and Cobra Commander going around beating up people. It's so weird.
Well, that's part of it. That's part of the story. But no, it's him becoming Snake Eyes and becoming a member of the G.I. Joe.
I get it.
After, obviously, it shows him when he first learns martial arts in Japan and all that stuff.
I'm still into it.
You've Eric, you've read G.I. Joe have you read G.I. Joe comics when you found out that they made them?
I read the what do you call it, the yearbook, but I haven't read any of them in any level of continuity. Like I haven't read the X. How many issues came out from Marvel from back in the day?
It was like 150 something.
150 something.
Yeah, I could be wrong about the number, but did you ever read that silent interlude issue? I mean, you don't have to really read it.
Everybody talks that up, and I have not read more than 3 pages from it.
I mean, there's no words.
You don't have to read it. You
just got to look at the pictures, But man, that was such a revelation back then. And of course, it was a screw up, I guess, because it wasn't supposed to go out that way.
So
it was supposed to have words?
I think so, yeah.
Wow,
I think so.
That's a big mistake. Must have been a really good artist on that one. So we've already established that you've been a dirty speculator since you were like 8 years old.
Yeah.
How have you always handled your comic books with care? I know now you like to have you got the gimmick where you break the CGC because you think comic books shouldn't be there. Did you ever just roll them up, throw them in your back pocket, and jump on the bike?
For sure. When I was a kid, we used to draw on our comic books.
Oh yeah.
And we drew
pixie art,
penises.
Yeah,
all over the place.
You made them anatomically correct.
No, we just drew penises on covers for some reason. It didn't have no reason for being on the page other than that. Sometimes we would draw other superheroes on the cover. That was when we would trade them. But when I started collecting, yeah, I take care of my comics. I have boxes where it doesn't matter, even to this day. I got into a situation where I didn't care about bagging or boarding, but they would fall all over the place. So, or get dirty. So then I put them in bags, but then the boards, they fall. So then I just bag and board them, you know. But no, I take care of my comics. I don't like, you know, thrashing them, but when you go into a comic store for the first time, if you want to really test the waters, definitely buy an X-Men comic and roll it up and put it in your back pocket.
I can guarantee you to this day, Breen has never mishandled a comic book, even when he was a little newsy, you know, throwing out newspaper things as a little kid. He always took care of his comic books, right, Breen?
That's not true.
What?
When I was,
you seem responsible.
Well, back in the day when I had to hide it from people, I remember one night I was on my first job. I was a dishwasher at a restaurant, and there was a stop and go down the street, and they had the new comics. So I went down there and I bought about 12 of them, and I wrapped them around my leg and tied them down and pulled my pants down over them, trying not to get caught by
you were smuggling cocaine across the board.
I might as well. I'd have gotten. I'd been
next thing you know, Breen's fake pregnant, and he's got comic books in his belly, and
I remember it had the Spider-Man annual with the John Byrne cover that reprinted the 2 Hulk issues right before Gwen got killed. But yeah, so I remember silly things like that.
Dude, you know what's cool is the fact that there's instances in your life where you remember the cover of the particular book and the contact that you did with it. Similar to Breen, I would go to my local 7-Eleven, right? And by the way, Mom, if you're listening, please forgive me, but I would skip church, right?
Oh, for a Filipino mom, that's not good.
I know. I don't think. Yeah, she should be very proud.
That's a beating if you get caught.
Don't. I hope my mom's not listening, because to this day she'd still kick my ass. But yeah, I would go to local 7-Eleven and just spend my hour plus minutes. I'm definitely not getting into heaven. Spend the money that I was supposed to
give as an offering.
Wow. As an offering.
Wow.
Go to 7-Eleven and use it to buy comics at the local 7-Eleven. I would remember those covers, not just because I'm a sinner, but also because they were really, really freaking awesome. I remember seeing Sleepwalker for the first time, sitting there, and I debated for weeks whether or not I wanted to buy that, because that was the price hike. It went up 25 cents with that book, right? I can't remember if that was a Brett Blevins cover or not, but man, I did not like that comic book after all was said and done, but I spent my money on it.
It was the sin behind it.
I think it was.
When you went to church and you actually had to go in there and confess your sins.
Yeah.
Like, what did the priest think? He's like, well,
that is a lot of assumptions that you're making.
Wow. That I actually went to church to confess. No contrition or anything.
Oh my God.
I'll have you know on good authority, Lutherans are okay with what you did.
Right.
He'll repent on his deathbed. He'll end up repenting it then.
It's all right. Don't worry about it.
But no, I remember those covers, man. I remember the moment I saw a hologram on a cover, I was like, what is this thing? Right? When they would hold off I remember seeing Turok for the first time as a cover, and those things were all, that was the big fancy version back in the
I like Chromium more, I think, than any of the other. Well, Glow in the Dark is always #1 for me. I
don't like 3D covers.
I like 3D. Well, I like 3D interiors for sure. But you gotta wear glass. Like if I'm at the comic store, when I'm looking at that, I always.
There's a place where you can wear those stupid glasses and not look like a moron. It's a comic shop.
That's true, but you got to have the Spider Jerusalem version.
Oh,
so if you do that,
that would be crazy.
Then you're cool in the comic store.
The chicks are gonna come up and talk to you.
Oh yeah,
I think it's more you scare people.
Well,
they stay away from you. How about the scratch and sniff covers? You like those,
I don't usually scratch and. I have the Harley Quinn marijuana
the Harley one,
but I have never scratched or sniffed it. So
smart man.
Yeah. I wonder. But
that supposedly caused trouble at the border when they were trying to get those off through the border. That they ended up triggering like dogs. Yeah. Supposedly, I think that might be a little made up, but that was the big deal. Yeah.
I mean that should have been.
That sounds like a Paul Heyman lie. They seized it all, boys.
Oh, I was thinking it was going to be a Tom King lie, maybe.
Well, maybe.
Yeah, there's a lot of those.
We got a dumb lie for going to a Comic-Con. You know what's crazy? Like how movies have kind of overtaken geek culture in a lot of ways. Kind of watered it down, made it less than what it used to be. But back in the day, we did get a comic book movie every once in a while. I wasn't really there for Superman. Obviously, that was the year I was born. I remember liking Superman 2, but Batman, when it came out with Michael Keaton, and everyone was up in arms because they got Mr. Mom to play Batman. And I liked Michael Keaton as a kid, so I was excited for it. But I remember like Batman 89 being like the biggest thing in the history of the world as a kid. Not even really as a comic book reader, but everybody was freaked out about it. McDonald's had like all these promotions. We would sit at the lunch table in school and we'd be trading Batman cards.
Oh, yeah.
Because you wanted to get a full set.
Well, the success of Batman launched a bunch of comic book movies because they didn't know what it was, right? They just thought, hey, if it's a comic book related kind of IP, let's go make it. I am very grateful for The Rocketeer as a movie. Not,
That's
not
a pretty decent
having
one that didn't blow up.
It holds up. Well, the reason I think I remember because it came out the same weekend as T2, and there was no way somebody was going to watch a Rocketeer movie the same weekend that Terminator 2 came out. Yeah, but it's like I remember being there. I walked 3 miles to go to the local movie theaters just to go see Batman 89 for the first time, and having never seen anything like it before, like the phenomena behind it. It was all sorts of trash at the sidewalk leading into the movie theaters. And then my friend had to explain it to me. Oh, by the way, these guys stood out here all night because there was no reserved seating, right? So the first people in line would be the first people to watch it. But I'd never seen anything like that before. And I had so much fun watching that movie too. It's so impactful.
Showing. Yeah.
It's so impactful. They're still riding off the coattails to this day based on this Flash movie that's about to come out. And you're like, some of the people about to watch this movie don't have any of that in context in '89. They just want to see Ezra Miller run fast or pretend to.
Like Jack Nicholson played the Joker?
Dude,
maybe the greatest actor in Hollywood at the time.
And he took he didn't take a big payout. He got proceeds, like he got a percentage of the movie.
Well,
instead.
That was smart then.
And he made a ton of money.
I didn't see it in the theater because we had a local theater and it was real close to my house, so I could just walk there. And I ended up trying to go multiple times and I couldn't get in. It was sold out. And then I kind of gave up. I actually just kind of gave up and then saw it later. But then at that point you had to wait a while to do that. And it's funny. You
have to wait for it to come out on Blockbuster. It might be 7 months.
Thing happened to me
at least.
And then the first month you can't get a copy.
No,
you got to go in every hour.
In our town, we had this one theater and only showed 2 movies, so we ended up. It was kind of the luck of the draw sometimes. And Return of the Jedi never came to our town what happened is all my friends, they got their mom and dads to take them to surrounding towns, but my dad, he would never do that. So I ended up buying the novelization and reading that to pretend that I watched it, and I would start talking. The problem is there was a lot of scenes that weren't in the movie, and I started talking about nonsense, and people they figured out that I was lying. I didn't see it until later. I actually
saw. You're a poser, Jim.
Everybody was talking about it, and it was my favorite thing, and I couldn't go see it. And then later, I ended up going to England and seeing Return of the Jedi for the first time as a triple feature with all of them. So it was pretty cool.
You guys remember being in Blockbuster and you wanted to rent Home Alone and you'd be like watching for people returning them through the slot, hoping you didn't see the name. Like, there's a copy of Home Alone. Get it right now. I'm taking it home.
Do you guys remember the Taco Bell Batman glasses from the first movie?
Oh yeah,
sure.
Every week you'd have to go. Yeah, it got you.
Well, movies
were
like
Taco Bell 4 weeks in a row.
But movies were like that, They would. Sorry about that. They would stay in theaters for a long time. It did take months for it to leave the theater. It took even longer for it to get on video and be at Blockbuster. Sure. Yeah. It wasn't even a consideration that it was going to be on cable or anything, if there even was for people.
Minimum,
Exactly.
3.
Yeah. Now it's like same day release sometimes, on DVD or whatever, or streaming and stuff like that. And I feel like, in comic books, one of the problems is it was nice in the summer when you had bi-weekly comic books. I'm sure the artists didn't love it that much.
You could ride your bike too.
Right. But, you know, the rest of the year was still a monthly comic book or a bi-monthly comic book. And it's the same way with movies. You know, there wasn't always a movie coming out every week. Add the fact that there's superhero movies so often, you know, it always seems like there's something coming out like that. And there's no time for any reflection or repetition of viewing, because it's going to be at home and I can watch it. I don't have to go out in the theater and see it. I've thought, like, in the last 10 or 20 years, especially, it's really weird when someone goes out and sees a movie in the theater 20 times. You know, it's like, why are you doing this? You know, it's just crazy.
But
one and done.
Now, one of the things
pretty enormous in your house nowadays.
One of the things for me when it came to why comic books were so impactful as a kid is because there was no way to replicate it in movies, right? Like the big stuff that you're seeing on Thor, big stuff that you're seeing in all the other stuff. Well, for me, when I was collecting, again, X-Men, Thor, Fantastic Four, when I was reading that stuff, they would try to translate it. And I think that's the reason why Batman was so amazing as a feature film, because it managed to capture stuff in the Batman comic books almost one-to-one, you know, short of maybe Michael Keaton as an actor that nobody really cared for or they were nervous about, right? But as soon as feature films, as soon as movies started catching up to what comic books were promising from an visual experience standpoint, that's when I kind of started getting this feeling like, oh man, we are on a short leash when it comes to like things that we can't that we can do in comics that movies can't. And I remember seeing Iron Man for the first time, going like, yeah, that's pretty much it. They got it. They nailed it.
And I thought, man, that costume sucks. I can't believe anyone's going to see this movie.
You didn't like the big Adi Granov interpretation of Iron Man from back in the day.
I wouldn't go to the movie with my roommate. I would have seen it eventually and everybody liked it. But that was just because I was predisposed to not like Iron Man's costume. So.
it would have looked silly with the old school and with the pointy ears. I couldn't imagine them going like, yeah, no, this is going to be legitimate. We're going to do that version of Iron Man.
Man, you know what else I miss in theaters, Yule?
Yeah.
You probably still have them where you are. Drive-in theaters.
We do have a few still, yeah.
Man, those things were great. You get like the double feature. You get the first movie, and then you get at the end. So if you show up late, you could play the movie through your stereo on your car. If you brought a truck, you just pulled it in backwards. You could have a case of beer, you know, if you're 16 or older.
Back in the day, you used to have to put the speaker on your window. You could hear it. That was pretty fun.
Yeah.
And, you know, living in Southern California, LA, didn't have to worry about like cold weather or rain too often. Jim talking about two movies, man, there are two movie theaters in my freaking city. There were six movie theaters in each one at least, you know. The big one opened up, you know, years later, and it had 24 theaters and stuff like that. You go to LA if you want to see something small, and it's not far away. So that's a privilege a lot of people haven't had.
The first movie I saw on a drive-in was Ice Pirates.
Really? Mine was Star Wars, New Hope.
Mine was Laser Blast, just to let you know. Look up Laser Blast. Don't look up Laser Blast. Since you watched
Star Wars, you bought the best one, but Ice Pirates is a close second. Man, that movie
Ice Pirates is great.
I liked Ice Pirates. And it was fun because when we saw that at the drive-thru, my dad, he would have us sit on the roof of the car. We'd actually lay on there with a blanket. It was really fun.
Gregory Hines' greatest role, right?
Yes.
I think it is.
Holy crap, I'm looking up Laser Blast.
Am I crazy for thinking Ice Pirates would be a good comic book series, Eric?
You know, there was a comic that Evan Dorkin did called, it was Pirate Corps, and it was a big space and funny comic like that. It's not like Ice Pirates, but
did they have really funny jokes about the black robots and stuff?
They had really funny jokes, but
remember
I don't think
Space
it was specifically that way. I do remember Space Herpes. Yes.
Did you say Space Herpes?
Yeah,
it's got Space Herpes.
Yeah.
Is this a comedy? Is this like Spaceballs? Is that what this is? Okay.
It was predecessor to that, right?
Yeah.
Holy crap!
I'm
gonna watch this movie.
I was a little bitty kid at the time. That was back when my parents were divorced.
I was telling somebody yesterday, a customer, that my dad, when I was a kid, took me and my 2 younger brothers to go see Conan.
Oh, brilliant!
It was awesome.
That movie came out in like 82, I believe.
Yeah, so I was like 12, and they're much younger than me. But there was
John
boobs and
Milius
beheadings,
classic.
man. Yeah.
One of the 5 best movies of all times, in my opinion. Man,
I remember the first time
boobs, absolutely.
I remember my older cousin, you know, I came home from school one day and he's like, hey, don't tell your mom that I'm about to show you this. And he showed me Predator for the first time. And I didn't quite understand why it was so taboo until the movie started. My jaw dropped to the floor going like, oh my gosh, there's so much killing in this movie, which I'd never been exposed to before.
People getting gutted in that one.
Yeah, dude.
Hung up and like dried out.
Oh, yeah.
that opening scene where they just kill everybody in that encampment. I was like, this is crazy.
Dude, Predator, you can do anything with Predator. Like any time era, any planet.
Don't tell Ed Brisson that. He did nothing with it.
I know.
Don't tell Gabe that.
Don't
but I mean, like that's one of I think that's a property you can do anything with. You know?
Sure.
They made that Prey movie, which is actually pretty decent.
It was all
holds
right.
up.
I mean,
that holds up. I remember seeing all the Dark Horse stuff that, you know, they would do the pirate version, they would do the medieval. I thought that was really fun to read through.
Yeah,
man, they had that Predator Hunter series out of Dark Horse, which has more potential than anything I could think of, where you're basically taking all the people that have survived encounters with predators, putting them on a team, and then they're going to go out there and hunt them down and murder them.
Yeah.
And they somehow made it boring. I was like, how did you pull this off?
When was this, Wes? What year?
Probably 2018, 2017, something like that. It was relatively recent. It was before they lost the license over to Marvel. I was like, man, this is going to be great. You're going to go down and take out an entire pack of predators. And it was like, it was just a bunch of people bitching. Whatever.
I remember that first Alien Predator crossover at Dark Horse. And it was the one where that lady gets caught up in it from the colony. And I remember when they initiated her, she broke off one of the fingers from the aliens and put like that symbol on her forehead. And I lost my mind as a kid going like, oh my gosh, that's the freaking coolest thing.
How did they mess up that movie?
I don't know.
I was like, God, I don't know. It writes itself. You just have aliens and predators fight each other. During the movie, when they were fighting, it was awesome. And
they added human, right? Yeah, that's the problem.
So you know the predators giving googly eyes to the hot chick at the end?
Were they really? No.
Yes.
I've clearly blanked that out from my head.
It's almost as bad as Marky Mark wanting to make out with Hella Bonham Carter as an ape rather than the hot girl. Planet of the Apes. I was like, what is going on here?
Well, Planet of the Apes.
Breen, what's the first comic book you saw as a movie? Is it Superman?
First, let me say I'm impressed. Fuck you. First, let me say I'm impressed that we went from what got you into comics to space herpes in just 90 minutes.
Yes. That's how the conversation flows organically.
That's a good question. Probably Batman 66, I guess.
Ooh, shark repellent.
Yes, but that wasn't in theaters, so that was made for TV, wasn't it?
No, it was a theater movie, I think. I mean, I saw it in much after that when it came out.
I saw it on Nick at Night.
Yeah, I'm sure I'd seen it in some kind of rerun. I think the first one I saw in theaters probably was Superman 78. I mean, because
when does Flash Gordon come out? That
was 1980.
Okay, so it's a couple years after that.
Yeah, but I just assumed you were talking about the 30 cereals.
The cereal.
That's why I told you that.
I wasn't making fun.
I knew that's what you thought.
Well, that's a first. I assume. My bad.
No, he was there for those first Batman and Captain America cereals.
Yeah, well, I've got one of these for you too.
Good. Flash Gordon is another good comic book movie. I like that one.
Man, that's cheesy.
Yeah,
but it's a good kind of cheesy though.
Yeah, it is.
That great soundtrack.
Totally.
Yeah.
Please. Yeah.
Yeah.
Queen, man, they did that, and I love the Highlander soundtrack that they do. Also.
I saw Flash Gordon in the theater twice. I ended up going back and seeing it. I liked it. I thought it was a lot of fun, and the soundtrack was great.
So what's better, Jim? Is it Flash Gordon or Krull? Which one's better?
I think seriously, I think I saw Krull in the theater 3 times. I loved Krull. At the one point when those were coming out, I couldn't get enough of anything like that. And to combine fantasy and space, it kind of did blow my mind a bit with Krull. But Flash Gordon's a little better. But the funny thing is when you end up, the Glade was great.
I think it's the music just sends it over the top.
Around that same time, too, I ended up seeing Crush Groove 5 times, but that's another story then, if you ever saw that. That was awesome. But one of the things that we were talking about that I really like, too, that you don't get anymore is seeing going through Blockbuster and looking at the covers of the things. Because when you ended up saying Space Pirates, I started thinking to myself, I'm like, I know I can picture in my mind the cover of that, and it looked like Mad Max in space. So I think that's why I ended up like,
Pirates
oh my god,
the whole
it
team,
was so
like
cool.
we're all around him.
Oh, I loved it, and but that whole thing, Krull was pretty good. You don't hear anybody mention Krull anymore.
There are some people. It's picking up now that everything else has been talked about.
Yeah.
So you just wait. You got to get out there now. Talk Krull up so that people think you're the one.
Space truckers, stuff like that.
Your movie theater likely had Krull instead of Return of the Jedi.
I know. Whoever was, I said before, it's funny how when you go through, thinking back in the day, and a lot of your pop culture things and the things that you end up loving are really at the whim of like a local TV programmer or the cost of something. Because something like a Star Blazers or Battle of the Planets cartoons or things that I love, or like Thundar the Barbarian, I really like. But our movie theater, I don't know who the hell was in charge of getting these movies, because they did have some wacky ideas of what would be big, and not getting Return of the Jedi. And the weird play is, even in our town, when they had the re-releases, I think our town's against Return of the Jedi. They did. We even have a big theater then, and they didn't have that as well. We had to go to
my uncle
Allentown.
Was taking me to see Return of the Jedi. I was 4 years old. Obviously, I've seen Star Wars by this point. I'm a big fan. Everyone loves Star Wars by 1982. It comes out. We go to get there, and it's sold out. And my uncle says, we're not going to The Empire Strikes Back. We're actually going to go see Krull. And apparently I ran off, and he had to track me down. And I would tell anybody that would look at me that my uncle was gypping me, because we're not even going to see Star Wars. It was one of my favorite stories.
You should have called the cops.
Gypped
me. That's a federal offense or something.
But I ended up loving Krull to this day. I didn't even realize I saw it with him until he told me when I was older.
Really?
I was like, oh, you're the reason I like Krull. It was a good mistake.
You're the Krull trafficker.
Those were Krull had the Cyclops that knew when they were going to die, right? I thought that was that was pretty impactful, because to me
they gave up an eye to see the future.
Yeah, it's kind of like knowing when you're going to die or living forever and seeing everything is, torturous, very much something that I like to think about when I'm making like a villain character, or when I was thinking of stuff like that. It's like, what is something that everybody likes, but how can you twist it so that it's not beneficial? It's not something that you want to have. And that's what drives these people crazy, to be just bad people, It
was a good villain is Legend with Tom Cruise.
Yeah.
I only saw it once, but I don't remember.
The guy from Rocky Horror Picture Show, he's got
the
darkness. He's pretty much
Tim Curry with the darkness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. That's Tim Curry. Tim Curry just being Tim Curry under all of that prosthetic, man.
Yep.
I like him a lot, though.
One of my friends would argue between what was better, Legend or Lady Hawk. And get out of town. I know.
Wow, really? I thought Lady Hawk was considered the better movie by most people, at least around my group of friends.
I like
maybe they were
better.
Broderick
You're
fans.
not normal.
Yeah.
Uppity.
Matthew Broderick was a big deal.
They built all of Legend inside a soundstage. I can't imagine how much that place stank by the time they were all said and done. They were losing birds inside the rafters.
Really?
Oh yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. They had so much stuff that's just up in the air, like all the atmosphere, because that's a Ridley Scott movie, right? Like all the stuff that you see in camera, they were just throwing it, you know, to give it that sort of like depth of field effect, and that place needed to land somewhere. They weren't picking that up. Every time you saw birds, every time that you saw all the elements, that were still all in them. They were all in that soundstage.
And isn't Ridley Scott like notorious for putting his actors through hell? Like
That's
he
James
really
Cameron.
James Cameron as well.
James Cameron's almost murders people every movie.
Ridley
you
Scott.
Ever hear about the guys making The Abyss?
Yeah.
Multiple actors almost drowned during that movie.
Man, water movies, you should get double pay if you're doing anything around water. Like Jaws sounded like it was horrible. There's the Water World. Now you're talking about Abyss. It's always more expensive. Just everybody should get double.
But all those examples look awesome, though.
Yeah,
look awesome.
Yeah.
You remember seeing Jaws in theater?
I didn't see Jaws in the theater, but
I did.
when I saw it for the first time, I
remember it scaring the crap out of me. I imagine in the theater I would have crapped myself.
My mom ended up taking us to see that. Luckily, we were on vacation at the beach. And
was this her Daredevil moment?
It ruined my entire. It was Deadpool. Yeah, it was. My mom ended up. I saw that in the theater while we were at the beach, and then also she took us to see Amityville Horror when that originally came out. And I remember my brother.
Were you in New Jersey at the time?
Actually, we were in Jersey for Jaws. Later, we were at the. My brother was chewing all this gum or something. He had all this gum, and then my mom got angry at him and told him to stop chewing that gum. So he didn't want to get rid of it and put it in his hand. And then later, when a scene came, he ended up covering his eyes and gum got all on his hair and nonsense. And she was yelling at us. But yeah, Jaws. We wouldn't go into the water then because of how scary, obviously. And we were kids, and my dad was so pissed because my dad somehow he thought going to Wildwood in New Jersey, somehow he thought he was getting ripped off if we didn't go in the water, even though it's no money or anything, but he thought that he was getting ripped off and screamed and yelled at us the whole day because we wouldn't go.
Water.
Yeah, he was.
Just
get in the water. Get in the water.
We didn't come all this way without you getting wet.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember I went in up to my ankle, and he wanted me to keep going, and he's yelling, "There's no damn shark in the water!" He's just screaming and yelling. But then everybody. There weren't that many people in the water because of that movie. It was so big.
My goodness.
Yeah.
So Jim took his younger boys to go see the very first Deadpool because his wife made him.
She made. We were talking about this last night because I ended up for some reason, I don't know, on YouTube it just popped up the trailer for Deadpool 2. And I said to my wife, "Did you ever see Deadpool 2?" And she said, "Oh, I didn't even see Deadpool, the first one." And I thought, well, we should see it and whatever. And she said, "Oh, did Logan see that?" I'm like, "What are you talking about? You made me take him. He was 6." And we went in there, the 6-year-old, because she was so mad because she made it seem it was weird. Like I said, we can't go. Somehow she thought I had promised them and then started yelling that I was just an awful You promised them you would go. You're just an awful dad. I'm like, screw it. Let's go, boys. And we all went. And as we were going to the theater, no joke, I always listen to sports radio. And a guy was on talking about Deadpool because it was so big at the point, talking about how you shouldn't take kids to see it. And then we went, and we had him, and I had to sit next to, I had both of my youngest, on either side so that I could cover their eyes and things like that. And then I just gave up. I'm like, this is it. And the whole time I'm just thinking, I'm going to be blamed for this later, and it's not my fault. I got forced into it. I was so pissed. But, I'd love to say that they grew up well-adjusted, but, they really haven't. So maybe it is my fault in Deadpool, but I think they have other problems too.
Gentlemen, I'm getting the high sign from the wife to excuse myself. So always brilliant to hang out with each and every single one of you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us and having a little geek out. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. It was a lot of fun. Guys, have a great weekend.
What can we expect out of Arca Theater? You got anything going live right now, or is we got a little?
We got another couple of weeks before pre-production on 4 is almost done, and then 5 and 6 are coming out. I'm trying to, just between the 5 of us to hanging out, I'm trying to release 4 and 5 all at the same time. That way, people are serious about it.
Put them in the exact same campaign.
Well, release them via Iconic Comics. That way they know, hey, I can pick up 4 and 5, and then 6 is probably another few months from then.
Is
nice.
it will just be buying it straight from Iconic this time?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Rather
I think
than
I didn't have the energy to do I mean, I know guys are built for it. I am not, for the crowdfunding thing. And it seemed to be that if I put all of my focus into just making sure the books get done, and obviously like having the people at Iconic help to hype it up, it seems to do, as well, if not better business than if I were to launch it, via crowdfunding. So why not do it that way?
You have a channel also, right?
Yeah, but like we were talking about this offline, I'm not as good at it as I should be. Right? Like I should be hyping it more via, what do you call it? Via YouTube or whatever. I just don't have the gear the same way that you guys do.
Well, you're a hell of a nice guy, and you're a wonderful artist, and I'm not surprised that people go out and find a great comic book. The first few volumes of Arc Athena have been amazing, so people are going to go
check it out.
Once you find out.
Go to iconiccomics.com. That's available there, and then go follow me on my social media under Eric Canete. And thank you so much, Wes. Thanks, guys.
Really appreciate it. Later, brother.
Yeah. All right, we'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.
All right, now that we got Canete out of here, we can have a real conversation.
Talk about how horrible he is.
So the last thing I wanted to talk about, we kind of talked about comic books as a kid. We kind of got into movies and stuff. Remember when arcades were enormous? And we had
one right by the theater.
Arcades games. I remember that X-Men game where it had the 4 console, like where you could play 4 players at a time, and the screen was enormous. I would always play as Nightcrawler. That is one of the greatest video games of all times.
I loved. We had a arcade in our mall in our town, and the thing is, the best was you'd go there, and it was always so dark. And I was so scared when I first went because I swear to God, I thought that I was going to get abducted or something. But me and my buddies would go, and the thing that really screwed me though was when they stopped, and I didn't realize at one point when they stopped just giving you quarters, and they had those stupid tokens that you had to use there, and it drove me nuts. But man, I love the arcade, and also just not even that, but we have, we're in the Philadelphia area, and we have like 80 pizza places in town. Oh, and man. I used to
every pizza joint used to have 3 arcade machines.
You'd have 3 arcade machines, and then you'd even have, the idea. Pizza Hut in our town had the sit-down machines as well. They had Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man and stuff like that. So it ended up where my dad would get mad. My dad was always mad at me, but he would get mad because he realized that at points I'd say, let's go there. It was only to play the video game. So he would get pissed off. Like, I hate that pizza place.
Going to Pizza Hut was a big deal. Like, you would take the entire family.
Oh, yeah.
Like
we would go every Friday night at points. So my dad would get a pitcher of beer. And all that. They had a jukebox and also the sit-down video games, and we would play that. But my
kids won't believe it, but Kentucky Fried Chicken used to be a big deal for families. Like, you were proud to give your family KFC.
Yeah.
Not anymore.
And even again now I yell at my kids because we have so many pizza places and real actual pizzerias, and they're like, we're gonna get Domino's, and I'm just like my dad now. I just start screaming at them, we have real pizza in this town. I start yelling.
You're gonna get cheap pizza. At least go Little Caesars.
Yeah.
Well, cheap.
Our Little Caesars in town ended up shutting down. We don't have it anymore because if you go and look up Little Caesars Quakertown on Yelp, you will find the worst and craziest reviews. I actually was in line at the Little Caesars where one guy was in the bathroom. He wouldn't come out. The guy's yelling at him. The police showed up. I don't know why. And the guy who was the manager faked a heart attack by throwing himself on the ground. It was pandemonium. People were going nuts. And the problem was, it was, not so long ago, I had already paid for I was waiting for my stuff because I paid on their stupid app. And if you leave, you're just done. And but then the police, the one guy, because he faked, I don't know what he was doing. The ambulance came. Next thing you know, the only person working was the guy in the bathroom. He must have been doing, smoking pot or something. He wouldn't come out, and I just bailed. But you have to see these reviews. That's like a minor story for some things that seem to happen at that store, but we don't have that anymore. I like that. For having a lot of kids, you do have to go and look for the cheap options. And Little Caesars.
I love Hungry Howie's if you're down in like the Florida area.
Okay,
you get the Little Caesar style pizza. It's the same price, but you get a flavored crust. You can get it like ranch flavored, barbecue flavored, cheese flavored.
I used to like the Bigfoot pizza
Howie's
that they had
amazing.
back in the day too. You know that I think that was Little Caesars that had the Bigfoot. That was huge. That might be Pizza Hut as well. But yeah, I'd love that.
I like Godfather's Pizza too. That was pretty good back in the day.
Yeah,
Little Caesars was a staple for like Dungeons and Dragons games for us. It was like you got
Little Caesars Mountain
Dew of the two, 2 and 1, and then you know what it was like $8, $12, something like that. I can't remember what the prices were, but it was minimal.
Breen is freaking out because he remembers when pizza was $1.
No, I was just thinking. I actually had a job at Pizza Hut for about 4 days.
Nice.
4 days?
Yeah, I went into their management program, and they had things mapped out. And when I realized that it was going to be
where your life was going, you're like, nah.
Well, I go in on day 3 and learn that on day 57, I was going to learn how to mop and sweep the Pizza Hut way. And I said, yeah, this sucks.
Yeah. You saw where your life was going.
Learning how to sweep again.
Did you play arcade games, Breen?
I think the difference between Jim, I don't know how old you are, but
I'm in my 50s, so I'm an old man.
I'm 61. So I think the difference between those handful of years, when arcades really got big, I was already in my early 20s, and it's kind of behind the curves. Did
they have a good Superman pinball when you were a kid? Maybe
I had that.
They did have pinball.
The Superman bigger, wider than the normal.
Very nice.
Ones. They had many more flippers.
I remember as a young hoodlum, me and 2 of my friends broke into
as a newsie
pinball machine.
Yeah.
The ball.
Oh no, I interrupted you.
Back when he was a jet.
Dance fighting.
Oh no, Breen is
roboting on us.
Yes,
he's good now.
And we broke into the pinball machines and stole all the quarters, and we're running through.
That's illegal.
Yes,
no
that
shit.
is.
And we're running, getting chased, I think, by somebody from the bowling alley through the drive-in area that was next to it, tying it back to the original story. They go, man, this is really not smart.
Absolutely.
Because I said, if you're going to rob something with paper. That's the moral, kids.
Yeah, you don't want to.
You're trying to get away.
Heavy.
Heavy, and you're also jingling, jangling.
Yes.
They know where you're going.
Probably losing most of the quarters on the ground anyway, trying to get away.
Remember back in the day when you had a soda machine? They weren't all cans. You can actually get bottles of soda.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Oh, that little popper right there on the thing.
We had a place in town. It was like a little gas station, and the guy thought it was neat to have one of those. It was pretty old school, that whole deal, even with that stopper and things like that. Well, we found out because the guy hadn't changed the price, so it was like 25 cents or so for a thing, and we used to just go in and get all the sodas. The guy was so pissed because it was just there. Yeah, it was just there.
The door
to be
would
something
open.
Neat. Yeah, and so we kept there, and the guy was like, "Screw that," and he ended up shutting it down because we bought too many sodas. Yeah, we did ruin it for everyone.
I didn't realize I was on a panel full of criminals.
Yeah. There was a point too when I was in my teens that a couple places had different sort of vending machines, and the big play was to try to rip them off. Not like Breen did and actually smash them open and run. It was just the idea of trying to get like 2 candy bars.
I was an
one
unwilling accomplice. I was led astray into a life of crime.
You're lucky there isn't superheroes, or Spider-Man would have webbed you up. The coins would be like stuck to the
You would have
wall. He writes
dangling. There would have been a picture of you in the paper the next day, and a note saying "Spidey got me."
There was this old rundown diner where I live, and we would go there, and like one time I got in trouble for taking my White Castles into there. They didn't appreciate that.
No.
But, one night, some buddies of mine decide that they're going to dine and dash. And I go, I'm not, I don't, that's not cool, man. Why not just pay for it, guys? And, well, he goes, no, we're going to do it. So we do it. And the waitress, we get caught, of course. They bring us all back in. And she points to the guy that had the idea and said, now this is a good boy. Not like that
didn't do nothing.
Yeah, not like that bad apple, and she's pointing at me.
He still had the comic books strapped around his legs.
Yeah, he's still quarters. Comic books.
Look, he steals comics too.
He's the Hale. He just throws quarters at people and runs.
Yeah, that's
Eric Breen versus Spider-Man.
Oh my goodness,
right there.
The point is, I was doomed to delinquency.
Yes,
yeah, wasn't your fault. But I guess is this the end of the show? We're at I guess 2 hours. It feels like we talked a lot about the geek stuff about when we were kids and the things that were fun. Does anyone else have anything else that they wanted to talk about? I might have talked over you. It's happened sometimes.
No, I think
right.
I'm like comic books has been the gateway for me personally ever since like I Electric Company. When they had Spider-Man in it, and I saw him for the very first time when I would get treasuries and I was reading Neil Adams and reprints, and to comics today, even things that it all led to where we are now, and it's an amazing thing, and it's still a really good medium, past and present. So I recommend people keep going with it.
Yeah, I'll even add in, because I started later, and a lot of the talk, earlier today is like, oh, when I was a kid and it felt so big and whatnot. I still felt that when I was an older fan getting in, because of the idea
but you
of
were
how
pretending
great it
to
was.
be a kid. So
well, yeah, that too, but I needed to win $50, so I'll do that. But
sometimes we need to tap into that kid mind again when we're reading this stuff, because we can be so easily influenced by stuff today, even our own regular lives. And, comics are supposed to be the escapism. And I know a lot of times they aren't, but they are also.
I will also add to anybody listening, if you ever had the idea, if you really want to enjoy comics, don't review them and don't have videos talking about them, because then you start to kind of look at it a little different. You have to look at it a little more critically and things like that. And
don't order them also.
Yeah. You tend to not, you enjoy them, but in a different way. And it ends up kind of taking away some of the fun and charm of it.
Well, I'll add some. I realize that it's changed a great deal in the damn near half a century I've been doing this. And I don't know how it could be as big a part of a kid's life today, because that's unfair to expect it to, because when you think about what's changed in entertainment in that half century, going from Nicholas Hammond swinging from a rope in a Spider-Man suit to what we have now. Again, damn it. It's still a great hobby, and no matter how much it's changed. Sorry about that.
Sorry. All the different, from the very first Spider-Man to the one today. Is that what you're saying?
Well, no, saying it. I mean, there's kids today have so many more options than I did in 1975, that I don't think comic books can mean as much to them. Regardless, there's just no way. But
I'll tell you what, they do like Fortnite, stuff like that, and you do get Batman skins and Spider-Man skins.
Kid loves Among Us.
Other kids can get jealous. It can happen. It's happening in different ways, is what it seems like.
I also want to start a bet: which dice first, me or Breen's computer? It's going to be at photo finish.
Your computer's no better. You sounded like the guy from Micro Machines.
I'm telling you, I don't blame myself for that. I blame my awful internet on that. But which I pay way too much for, by the way. It's nonsense. But yeah, I agree though. My kids, they're not really into comics, but they are into the movies, and they are into Fortnite with the skins and things like that. And I think that maybe eventually they might even, kind of cross over when their time comes. I'm not going to be able to force them to do that because they don't listen to me. But I think that eventually one of them is bound to enjoy a comic or two.
Absolutely. All I know is, ever since I've let comic books in my life, my friends have gotten geekier and geekier. I hang out with nobody but nerds, and now it turns out I hang out with criminals.
Yeah, I know.
That's all I know anymore.
You're
criminals
moving
and
up.
people with bad judgment.
Exactly.
So, This was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed this special Geek Out. I am on vacation with the family. This will appear as though it was live here on the YouTube channel. If there were any super chats, I apologize. I didn't mention this at the beginning. If there were any super chats in here, you thought I was live and you didn't realize until later. Myself and Aaron Sparrow are going to go over those when I come back from vacation. So this is a lot of fun. Special thanks to Eric Canete, who obviously bowed out earlier, to Yule Carter, to Eric Breen, as well as Jim from Weird Science. Thanks a lot, fellas.
Thanks.
That's right,
Thank
man.
you.